afternoon, everyone. Next up, we've got Kene. He's from Nigeria, but he's living in Amsterdam at the moment. And I see he's currently a UX designer at Booking.com. Prior to working at Booking.com, he also led the design at the Co-Creation Hub, and it's one of the largest innovation centers in Africa. In 2013, he started Usable, a design community with the goal of elevating conversations about human-centered design with the African technology ecosystem in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for coming to this. I've always tried to figure out how to start about this talk. And then we have this isn't working. Okay, this is tricky. Let's see. Oh yeah, it is working. Yeah. So typically, at the start of a talk, there's a GIF or GIF, depending on what planet you're from. This GIF literally has no semblance or no significance to the talk, but hopefully to get some giggles out of you. So far, I think it's working. My name is Kene. I'm a product designer, a GDE. I like to consider myself a pretend chef because I like to eat food and I like to try out stuff. The last bit I always try to add in my presentations, especially when I'm introducing myself, is human. And the reason, my reasoning behind it is that I am doing two things. One, I'm trying to remind myself that the things that I'm building is for other people. And two, I'm also trying to get the people listening to my talk to remind them that it is for humans, it is for other people. But before I go to today, before I try to get to why we're here, I figured I should take a few steps back to talk about my own personal journey to today. But then I'd seen a couple of talks today, and there was no mention of, there was just one slide where people talked about themselves, and I'm like, you're so self-indulged. You want to bore people about yourself. But I'll try to keep it short. And it all started off with a keyboard drawn on paper, literally. In secondary school, I'm not sure what it's called in South Africa, but in my secondary school in '98, this kid transferred to my school, and his dad was a professor at the university. His dad was a professor of computer science at the university. And then we became friends somehow. And he drew out this keyboard on paper and then started telling me stories. And those stories are the things that got my interest and why I started looking out for ways to learn more about the computer. Fortunately for me, at the same time, the school had already set up a lab, and I started sneaking out of class to spend as much time as I can in the computer science lab. Fast forward to 2006 at a cyber cafe, where I was filling out forms to apply. So I was filling out forms to get universities and some university in the US to send me the brochure. And then while that was happening, I had my own aha moments where I started wondering, the data I was filling out, there was someone that was seeing what I was sending, and one, someone was seeing what I was sending. Two, someone made it possible for me to send this, and for that person, or for the person who is reading what I sent, to see it. So at that point, I felt that person was a god who created the system that both of us were interacting in. At that point, I wanted to be a god. At that point, I started looking for how to be a god. I have failed in that, as you can see, I'm here. But I started out developing applications. Fortunately, people started paying me for it, which was weird at the time, but also nice. And then a couple of years later, I moved to Lagos, which is where I joined this company, Co-Creation Hub. So at Co-Creation Hub in 2012, I started helping out building. So Co-Creation Hub has what's it called? An incubation arm, which is basically where they support startups across different like sectors. And I started helping out the startups shape their design processes, and also like shape design processes within the company itself. And that led into building out like a usability testing lab, which was pretty much the first in the country at the time. A couple of years later, there is Usable, which is a design community. It is the largest design community in the country, I believe still. But it was basically the thought that the fact that I knew a lot about design, and I know a couple of people do, there wasn't a critical mass of people who were practicing human-centered design. And there was the thought that if I can get enough people interested in this, they can go back to their individual companies and do the evangelism, which is part of what I'm going to be doing here today. Now I'm at Booking for the last 1 year plus. It is the largest accommodation platform. We do about 1 million room nights, actually over 1 million room nights a day. We're based in Amsterdam. Over 200 plus designers trying to work together and collaborate. We have 160 plus product teams. But now back to today. So I've spent time on that. My goal with this is to hopefully get you to start thinking about like the design processes, not just the design processes, but the collaboration process within your team. And it's not about, the talk isn't going to be about like designing usable websites or there isn't a code bit. I'm sorry if you had that expectation and I'm about to disappoint. But that was the goal of the talk, is to hopefully broaden your horizon and change the way you possibly think about design. And yeah, so let's get started. If you were asked to like define design, like what would it be? Like, can anybody quick something? Design. What is design? Blueprint, recipe. Okay. Does anybody want to add anything? Creativity. Yeah. Okay, that's a good one. Okay, yep. Look, feel, and experience. Okay, that's a good one. But Steve Jobs disagrees. So basically, during this interview, Jobs was asked what design was, and he went on this long explanation, which ended in what then became the popular saying that design isn't just how something looks and feels, but it's how it works. While trying to put together this deck, I then stumbled on like a definition by Jared Spool. He's one of the top UX minds. He defined design as the manifestation of intent. At that moment, I felt like it was intense, like manifestation of intent, which means in my team or in our like different teams, the product that we eventually output, it is the design, it is the manifestation of our intent, it is the manifestation of the inner thoughts of our mind. But then again, if it is the manifestation of our intent, how do we then get the different bodies that are working together for that product or for that project to be able to communicate, be able to share ideas, and then be able to present an outcome, a product that is a good representation of the intent, while having like a clear understanding of the content and the context. So if I'm thinking of my job as a designer, if I'm thinking of my job as a designer within a team, my job as a designer within the team, it's not just to do sketches, wireframes, user testing, and all of that. That's great. But the thing is, if I go ahead and do all of those nice things and then come back to my team and there is a gap between the understanding of what I've done and the well, I say the understanding of the team. There isn't going to be a translation of my intent in the processes that I've gone to the final outcome of the product. What then happens is that an easy example of that is where you finish a UI design and hand over to a developer, and then the border is in a certain way, or the border is, or something is 3 pixels off. There is the joke that, like you have to move it 3 pixels to the left, or everything. But then the fact that the developer had that outcome isn't a case of where isn't a representation of the skill level of the developer. It's just a representation of their understanding of your intent. So I've identified a couple of things that I currently practice in my own team that has significantly improved how we work. And I want, the talk is about sharing that process and hoping that it is something that you can agree with or even try to practice. The first thing I wanted to think about is, would you call this a design team? Yeah? Okay. Is this a design team? It is. Okay, good. It is a trick question. Design, everybody who has an opinion or whose what's the word? Whose actions, thoughts impacts the final product is part of the design team, which is why it is important to get everybody's taste level to the same. It's important to create an intent that is shared among the different people who are going to be impacting the final product. To use, I'd gone past this. When I figured out what the title of the talk was going to be, I figured I should draw it to football. Now I understand, here in South Africa, rugby is way higher than football in terms of popularity, but it isn't? It is? I thought the Springbok was the most popular team. It is the Bafana Bafana. Really? Depends on who I ask. I asked Wikipedia. So I'm safe. So I'm using the football analogy. So if I'm thinking of my team in terms of a football team, there are different sections. That's the defense, midfield, and an attack. And if I'm thinking of my defense, that's my team lead. It's the managerial team or anybody who is the top decision making level. Primarily, their job is to keep obstacles away from me. Primarily, their job is to make sure that me and everybody on my team maintains focus while going by the day to day. Essentially, they are the guardians of my peace and my sanity within the context of the whole organization, because without them, a lot of bad stuff is going to come my way or a lot of distractions. And if I'm thinking of the midfield, I'd posit that the midfield is made up of the back-end developers and people like the UX researchers. Primarily, these are the people who work on stuff that a lot of people don't get to see. And by a lot of people, I mean the end users of the final product. You, or within the context of your team, you can understand their impact, but for the user on the streets, they don't know what they're what that is. So they are kind of like the unsung heroes. Finally, you have the attack, the guys that are there to help score goals. And so you have the front end developer, the product marketers, copywriters. Copywriters design the copy or the text that users get to see. Now, my job within the context of this football team that I've displayed is to make sure that regardless of the role that everybody is playing, whether it's the defense or the midfield or the attack, that there is a clear understanding of the intent of the full intent that we're trying to translate into a product. There is a shared understanding of the goals and the values that we're trying to accomplish. So then, how do we how do I then get everyone on my team to have this shared understanding? How do I get everyone on my team like appreciates the role or the user side of things across the different decision processes that they are going to be making? The first thing to consider is that everyone is invited. As a designer and as a member of a software development team or as a member of any kind of team, the first thing you probably want to do is to be open-minded about the other disciplines. And by being open-minded, it means that you're looking beyond the same number of people. Typically, if it's a meeting that is just the designer and the developer, odds are if you throw in like a product person or a commercial person in the mix, they're able to like offer bigger context. What then happens is that we start closing down the different gaps of understanding within the team. If we're talking about, say, a prototype, immediately the commercial person in the team is able to like start having conversations about the impact that the decisions that you're making is going to have. The backend developer is bringing the side of things where he or she is talking about the limitations of the device or the delivery medium that we're going to be delivering in. So everyone is invited. Look beyond the normal people that you normally talk to. Try to expand your scope in the way you involve people in the process. The other thing that is really important is that we need to talk. And talking there is that attraction to focus on your craft and get those fine details. Make sure that it's pixel perfect. But then again, like if you're not constantly having conversations with people outside your understanding of the business or your understanding of the team, then you are missing out on a lot of like very important and critical information that you should be privy to. Some of the things that you should talk about is your process. Hey guys, like we're trying to design this, but first, before we start setting up the sprints, can we do the mock-up and then do user research? And this is the outcome that we're expecting from the research. Can we test our assumptions? What do we do what can we do differently within the context of this product? And by having these conversations, you can have a better understanding of the business needs. If the approach I am proposing is different from the direction that the overall business is going to, odds are like eventually when I show up with the finished work, it isn't going to translate well into what the product is. So it makes a whole lot of sense to like have these conversations. And like I give the example of the disconnect or the developer talking about the constraints. This is a great way to like be able to facilitate those things. If I'm thinking about like the conversations, if we're looking at a developer, like the conversations may be around browser support, handoff. How do you want your assets? How do you want me to like give you the assets? Like, do I just put it up in an InVision prototype and you deal with it, or like do you need it annotated? Those little conversations are going to improve the interpersonal relationship or the dynamics within the team. If I'm talking to a copywriter, I want to make sure that the tone of voice that I'm proposing in the prototypes or in the final design matches with the existing standard. For a company like Booking.com, that our products are available in 42 languages, I need to make sure that when it's translated in German, or if I translate this button in German, what does it look like? Does it fit the space that I've already designed for it, or is it going to break? If I do skip through these conversations and then design and ship, what then happens is that the end product is going to have lots and lots of flaws, which could have been corrected if I had those conversations and accepted those learnings very, very early on. The last bit is to seek feedback. And there is feedback is not, seek constructive feedback. And in seeking feedback, it's not a bit where you have to wait for you to finish what you're trying to build. It can be a case of, oh, hey, here's a quick sketch. Like, what do you think about this? Do you think this is going to work? Depending on the team setting or depending on the sitting position, It can be the bit where you move your chair quickly to the developer that is sitting by your side to say, oh, how does this work in Mozilla? Like, or what are the things that we can do differently to be able to achieve this? It saves everybody a lot of time where like the bugs or where the limitations of the medium is easily identified and communicated to the rest of the team. Oh yeah, so yeah, share your work as early as possible. Don't wait until it's finished. By the time it's finished, and you feel that, oh, like, I'm now confident to share it, odds are, by the time it's finished, you've already also invested a lot of emotion into the work. What then happens is that when the feedback comes, you don't take it as constructive, even when it is. There is a lot of defense on your side, and you're so defensive. Oh, that's how it is, or like, can we just ship like this? I've been working on this for 3 weeks. Like, I can't go back. This, like, sharing your work as it's going is a great way to do this. Something that we do at Booking is something we call a lightning walk. Basically, you do a printout of whatever you're working on, stick it on the wall, and leave what are they called? Sticky notes by there. So anybody walking past that understand the context of what you're doing can give you feedback. You can leave it on the wall for a week, 2 weeks, however you want it, or depending on how it's arranged. The other bit is a design jam. Design jams are where designers present to other designers. However, the rule is that there are no, like, the rule is one, the person presenting is the authority on the subject matter, right? So, and the second rule is that there are no comments, there are only questions. So if I'm presenting the speaker, right? And if I'm presenting the speaker and someone wants to ask questions or wants to point out something they think could be different, say the stand. The conversation can go in the form of, can we possibly look at, can this stand carry X amount of weight, right? If I, as the presenter, haven't thought of that already, I can either answer the question at the time or say, okay, it's something that we have to look about. We have to look at and then revisit. Keeping the room in that frame of mind where there is no judgment, where there is no pressure from even me that is presenting, makes it very easy to pass on feedback from one point to the other. Also, it improves like the visibility of other people. Like, I mean, there are 200 plus designers. If like there is no way they are going to like come and see what you're doing unless you share it, and understand that there are different levels of expertise across board, and it's a great way for you to get feedback and start to see things like in new light. But if you've been paying attention to like all this I've been saying, you understand that this is really about communication. Communication is a great way. I mean, if doing like most of the things that I've talked about, is easy. Like there are easy, quick wins that you can use to improve the internal dynamics within your team. By improving those internal dynamics, automatically it is going to translate into a better built product and a product that is very, very understandable. What that also means is that since we're on the same team, ideally what that will mean is that we have the same like shared vision. Yeah. If nobody laughs, I would have cried. And of course, given that we're on the same team, we have the same shared vision. We have a shared understanding of who the user is, and given that the user is going to be our like northern star, it is very good. It is very easy for everyone in the team to be able to articulate like what their own contribution and impact in the team is, and how that translates to the final impact on the product itself. Yes, it does create a win-win situation, because if I am designing or developing in isolation of having an understanding of what the actual business need is, or just adding on the feature because my gut feeling tells me that, oh, like this feature is going to like be really cool to have. It's possible that the feature is going to delight the user and hurt the business. Opening opening up my space, opening up my my understanding, and having those conversations with people outside my discipline greatly improves my own understanding of the limitations, my understanding of the value proposition, and the different ways I can actually add value to the business. So I do invite you to lead. I do invite you to become the captain of the team. Yeah, look at me. I do invite you to lead. I do invite you to become the captain of your team, and bridge the gaps that exist, that could possibly exist within the team. It is easy. It's all about reaching out, having conversations, and being humble about it, and being open to learn. In essence, in as much as I've titled this talk, "Design is a Team Sport," like it's can easily apply to any other discipline. So software development is a team sport. Yes, it is. Management is a team sport. Of course, you can't manage just yourself. Testing is a team sport because yes, when you do get values, or when you do get results, rather, there needs to be another people or group of people who will get the results. Yes, one person. It doesn't take, there is a chance that there is no one single person who, like, once you add them to your team, that they are going to make your product like 10x better. But there is a chance that if you do exclude one person in your team, it is going to make your product 10x worse. Thank you. Yes, so I am happy to take questions. If you don't, you can always hit me up on Twitter.
Thank you. This was a very great presentation.
Thank you.
I sort of relate to it. I did a presentation last year on including software testers within an Agile Scrum team.
Yeah.
So the tradition is developers work in isolation.
Yep.
Software testers work in isolation.
Yep.
Designers work in isolation.
Yep.
And the defense from the developers is designers and software testers. They slow down the progress of a Scrum team when you time box. So how do you manage the integration of all the disciplines into one team? Because you have mentioned a lot of value that comes with the integration.
Yeah.
But there are also downsides where both parties feel like we perform better without designers. Hey, designers, just work in isolation and do a handover of your designs to us. You don't have to be in the same room with me.
Yeah.
So how do you balance the interactions and bridge the gap between what has been happening in the past and what we are moving forward to, where we have an integrated team of designers, developers, and testers?
Yeah. So within the context of within the context that you just described, we have the pockets of the different disciplines all together, as opposed to maybe representatives of those disciplines in one team, right? Within the context of my own team, like it's a multidisciplinary team, I have to do most of my own like design work way ahead of time before every other person, before sprint planning, before all of that. Like it's like from the beginning, it's being the way we've structured the team, just so we don't affect velocity when we're doing like the core like human-centered design stuff. But within that context, what I would encourage you to do is to try to get buy-in. If it's possible to, so an example is when the Obamacare? Yeah, when the first Obamacare website like had the whole fault and went down and all of that and was slow and all of that, they had instituted a new like digital service department and hired like 150 developers and one UX designer, right? So basically, what the UX designer did, what she did was to take the 150 developers and put them on field work. So when they have the interactions with the direct users that they are building stuff for, it greatly improves their own process because they have a larger and increased awareness of the impact of their own decisions. So in as much as you may not have the power to go like yank people off teams and say, look, we have to go do this, there may be value in having these conversations like open and honest and say, look, we need to try this and see the kind of results that we can get out of it.
Sure. Thank you.
I'm currently on a project where usually we have one team for everything, and we try to follow that model more or less. But I'm currently on a project where the one team is mostly just the developers, and there's a separate company, and this is not something that can change. Like, this is just due to the nature of the business. Like, it's a separate company. They do the designs, and they own the product. And they try to share, so we try and bridge the communication. They share their designs in progress with us, and at the end they give us a design and we implement them. But what advice would you give for this type of situation where there's this two separate teams, and you can't just go work at their office? Everyone, they have separate spaces, separate everything, but you want to keep communication up, and you want to work together on the designs rather than just receiving this design that you now have to implement.
I think, like, one thing, like, I could possibly advise, or question, is it possible to bring everybody in a room? Or representatives in a room?
Sometimes. We're in the same city, at least. Just not every day.
Yeah. I don't have explicit, like, advice for this, but what I think can happen is is for your own side is the implementation side or the design side, implementation side. So your own side to do a more push, like to increase the conversation between like the designers, since it's a totally different company. So it can be a case that is explained to the other company to say, look, like this is what we want to achieve, but like we'll appreciate it if you take us along the process as opposed to let's just be giving you feedback. So if there is a research going on, we want to see the numbers or want to see the outcome. If it's possible for our own people to join your people, like to go like on the field to do that, like let's try it out.
You suggest the developers join in from as soon as possible in the process?
Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. Like so, everybody who at some point is going to make a decision on the product should be at the start.
Thank you very much, firstly. I'd also just like to ask, from more of a junior perspective, if you have a senior manager above you who believes we should go left with the product, and you believe you can go right. Now, I understand there's either type 1 or type 2 error. You could be right, or he could be right, or she. And how would you deal, from your experience, how would you deal with that type of situation?
So, I mean, when I dealt with that situation, like, I sucked at it. Like, I went the direction I was told. But looking back at it now, like how I'll do things differently is to try to rope them in a position where I can, like, prove that they're wrong. And by doing that, like, I mean to say, hey, okay, so we should go add this, right? Okay, like, do you mind, can we just mock it up and do a quick test? Right? And then we'll do a test, and we'll do a test with 8 users, and 6 users don't get what we're saying. At that point, when you show that results, he or she isn't going to keep pushing to go left. They say, okay, so what do you then think we should do? You can then like say, oh, look, can we try this? And the way you push back will make it seem as if it was their idea all along, but it doesn't matter. Yeah.
That sounds like being married.
Okay. I just want to find out something. So as designers, where do you draw the line between this is what the user wants and this is the principle or design principle on a particular platform?
So like, can you like rephrase it?
Further?
Yeah.
So yeah. So currently, what we have, what the problem we have in our team is, So I'm working on the platform, on the Android platform. So we know like certain design principles we have to follow that have to adhere to Android, and iOS is different. Yeah. And then you get a designer comes back with the designs that do not adhere to those design principles that are Android based. Understand? And then when we push back on that, they're like, no, we did user testing. This is what they want. So how do you solve those type of problems in your team? How do you handle that? And where do you draw the line as to, okay? We're not going to do what the user wants.
So like, I guess without having a full understanding of the guidelines that have been broken, I may not have the best answer. But the first thing I probably want to see is, so we've tested it with this one that is breaking the guideline. What happens when we test it with the one that conforms to the guideline? Can we prove like the users don't like it? I am really curious to know what this is. But if you can prove, like if you have the data to back up like a design decision, like you should go with a design decision. If there is the data to back it up. If you've done the test, like if you've done the usability test to say 9 out of 10 people like were able to use this feature, like were able to go from point A to point B within this feature and get the product goal that they want. And when we tested it with the one that we agree is the standard, only 3 people did go with the 9 out of 10.
Okay,
I mean, that's what I would vote. Yeah.
I'd also like to add on a bit on what he said. I was in a similar situation where I was building an iOS app. I just built the Android. And they wanted the same look and feel of the iOS. I'm on the Android app on iOS. So
yeah. So in that case, typically, like, it's a question of is then like I'll probably say is how you then like communicate the limitations of like going one way to another. Like I don't have like a specific answer for that, but it's a question of like how do I convince them that we have to go through like we have to do this in a totally different way, in a way that the users are used to. If it's a drawer from the left, like there is a different way that iOS handles it. We can't do that. It will take us like 3 times the amount of work to do that on Android. Like if you can make like cases in terms of time, if you can make cases in terms of actual usability of the product, I think like there could be like possible ways that you can win the argument. I think that if you do an app the same ways on Android and iOS, I'm not sure like the usability is going to be the same, because both platforms have like their own like experience that the users of those platforms like are already used to. So trying to teach them new tricks, it's not going to be great.
okay, because I kind of failed to motivate, so I used Ionic and just got it working like an Android app.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever come to experience an issue where your front-end guys and the back-end guys are fighting.
They should go out for a drink. So I think it's like for the fact that it's gotten to the point where like there is like it's getting like to be confrontational. It is like it's a summation of all the bad bad air that has built up over time. Like we're just seeing it explode. Question: is it possible to move people around? Like within the context that you explained, like is it possible to swap out
not really.
any of the?
Not really. So I'll give you an example. I had a project where the front-end part is done by another agency, and then the back-end side is in-house.
Okay.
And these are people that really, 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 really hate JavaScript. So, but then unfortunately, the company has already given the contract to that agency for the front-end part. You know?
Yeah.
So I don't know how do you get the 2 teams to work together, and I don't know if at Booking have you experienced it, because you'll see if you find in any software dev house, all the backend guys, they don't like the front-end guys. You come with JavaScript, it's like, yeah, just get out.
Well, like I mean, within the context of Booking, I would like to hope that we all like each other, right? Of course, like there can be team dynamics where like it's not perfect, yeah. But I think if both people can agree on pursuing the same goal, then there are. I mean, if we can agree on like what our goal is, we can always swallow our pride, our ego to like get that done. I don't have an answer in terms of like how to fix that particular situation. Sorry.
Okay, we've got time for one more question.
Okay. Hi, everyone. So, with reference to your football team,
Yeah.
defense, guys, just iterating on the conflict aspect of it. So, you say that you've got your defense, your midfield, and your attackers, right? So, let's say my defense, which is in
The
my
guardians of your peace.
Yes, like the guardians, and are actually the ones that are bringing the attacks, are actually scoring on goals, if I can put it like that. So, and you feel that there might be a rift. So let's say your strikers are agreeing that, okay, fine, we need this own goal, but the middle guys actually are in contention. But because you said your defenses are actually your managers, how do you get that flat structure feel inside the room or the team to actually go on about it? And how have you managed to improve on it? Because improvements in processes is there. And how do you plan to make it be consistent and not go back to the ice age?
Like, unfortunately, there are a couple of things that the inter-team dynamics isn't going to fix. If at the top, like if at the top the hierarchy isn't communicated in a way that is flat, it's even more of an uphill task to be able to like make those changes within the team that is going to get turned back and affect like what the top is. In that case, like, I don't know. Like, maybe we can talk about this later, like get into details, and then we can see if I have advice for it. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Kene.
Thank you.
Okay, there's time for a quick 2-minute changeover.